what was the impact of coronavirus on banking sector. And obviously for Ukrainian economy, one of the greatest challenges was the deficit and fiscal stimulus for the economy. Of course, banks have accumulated larger portfolios of government bonds. If we speak about local currency denominated bonds, banks increased them by 46% throughout of 2020, that is plus 100 billion hryvnia, and we have just a few more auctions to go. But less than half of this amount can be in any way corresponded to the NBU's refinancing. The second half is just a market process. Banks have decreased their deposits with the national bank because they are tied to the key rate of the NBU, which was lowered to 6%. So they turn to more to the instrument with the higher interest rate, which is the government bonds. There is a widespread thought in the media that only state-owned banks buy those government bonds, basically helping the Ministry of Finance to finance the deficit. It's not true. If we look the aggregate increase in government bond portfolio, state-owned banks account for 2/3 of overall increase. So basically, it's the same proportion of as they have of the total banking system. Speaking about other ways to boost the economy, loans to the state-owned enterprises, we don't see any large increase in that area. In fact, they have decreased to just 1.6% of GDP. Unlike 2008, when we saw a huge boost to the economy during that crisis, when government-owned banks provided large loans to the government enterprises, increasing the total exposure to as many as 5% of the GDP. Just for the comparison, Ukrainian banking system total gross exposure to central government, I'm talking about the government bonds and bonds of such agencies as Ukravtodor, I'm sure Evgeny will talk later about, they accumulate to just 4.1% of GDP. And I believe in 2021, we will see some increase of this ratio, as I think there is room to grow in there. Many see loans to the state-owned enterprises and somewhat sinister and not always market driven. But on the other hand, if you look the large numbers of NPLs in state-owned banks, state-owned enterprises don't account for much of them. In fact, they are repaying, they have very good servicing of their debt on average. Let's move to the retail segment. In October 2020, we saw a situation when interest income from retail has overtook the interest income from corporate segment. So it's 35 to 34. Of course, retail loans have much higher interest rates, and interest rates on corporate loans have fallen significantly alongside the NBU's rate. But on the other hand, the gross exposure to corporate sector is 4 times higher than the retail sector. In my opinion, COVID has hit the shadow economy in Ukraine much more than it did the normal economy that we account in our statistics. If you look at the incomes of the households, they basically started to grow year-on-year basis. Not probably as much as projected before the COVID, but they are growing. And obviously the travel is far from what it was a year ago. So a lot of people are spending much less on externally, much less spending abroad than they used to. Some of this money has been transferred has been spent within the country. So we see a huge increase in the trading. sector, but also a significant amount is basically saved. If you look at the retail deposits in hryvnia, demand deposits specifically, they grew over 45% year on year. This is much larger pace of increase that we saw in 2019, where it was around 15 to 20%. So people spend less and save, probably because the times are uncertain. What will happen in 2021 with the virus? Nobody knows for sure, but at some point people will see a relief and will go on spending again. What they will spend for? Would it be a travel abroad? Will they give up and spend something big here in the country? This is the good question, but eventually it will stir up the demand within the country, which is so far sluggish. And with this fact that current accounts in hryvnia has reached 5.1% of GDP, record high.